would drop hints, and I sort of wondered, like, is he hitting on me? And then I thought, no, it can't be.
What Stephanie McMahon has shown through years of interviews and public appearances is that what looked like a perfect WWE power couple may have been more complicated behind the scenes, because Triple H has always lived inside two worlds at the same time.
Actually, I think I can look at it right now and say, if none of the Steph stuff happened and I didn't meet her, people bring this up a lot and it's a criticism of me or a knock on me.
We all thought we knew the truth, but what Stephanie McMahon admitted has changed the entire conversation. Let's break it down. The forbidden romance. Stephanie McMahon grew up inside WWE, not on the outside watching from a distance, but fully inside it from a young age. She started working for her father's company when she was around 12 years old and was surrounded by the business of wrestling from childhood.
Actually, I've worked for the company since I was about 12 in different ways.
What did you do at 12? Which division did you run?
I was a receptionist, actually for about 2 years.
She spent years answering phones, then moved through different roles around the office, the arenas, the writers, and the wrestlers, constantly surrounded by the noise and pressure of being a McMahon family member inside WWE. She watched the product from the time she was very young and grew up with it as part of her daily life. And over time, she became fully immersed in the business.
I wanted to do anything else, really.
Her father, Vince McMahon, was not born into wealth. He built everything from nothing. When Stephanie McMahon's mother was pregnant with her, Vince was reportedly on his way to court to deal with bankruptcy proceedings when his car broke down, forcing him to deal with financial collapse at the same time as starting a family. That kind of origin story shaped him deeply, forming the mindset that would later define how he ran WWE.
Actually, when my mother was pregnant with me, my dad had to take her to the courthouse and their car broke down and he was actually in a tow truck to go declare bankruptcy.
Vince McMahon worked his way up from nothing to build a wrestling empire, and that empire became the foundation his family inherited. His children were raised inside that world, expected to carry it forward, and Stephanie McMahon developed a genuine love for the business. She helped write storylines, appeared on camera, and was never just a boss's daughter sitting on the sidelines in luxury. She was actively involved in everything. But inside the company there was one strict rule. Stephanie McMahon was not allowed to date any of the wrestlers. In the late 1990s, WWE was deep in the Attitude Era, where storylines were bold, chaotic, and designed to keep audiences hooked every week. One of those storylines featured Stephanie McMahon and Triple H, where on screen they got married, worked together, and even took control of the company while pushing Vince McMahon out. It was all scripted entertainment, but behind the scenes something real was slowly developing that nobody had planned. Triple H began showing interest in her in subtle ways at first, dropping hints and making small comments.
He would drop hints, and I sort of wondered, like, is he hitting on me? And then I thought, no, it can't.
She kept telling herself he was just having fun and that it was all part of the act, but their on-screen storyline kept putting them in close proximity all the time. In character, she would sit on his lap, and they were often pressed together during scenes. Then, during one moment near the ring, he crossed a line in a way that left no room for doubt.
I was standing around the ring, he sort of crawled around me, he was, on the floor and he felt my leg.
That moment was not in any script, and Stephanie knew it immediately. She described it in simple, direct terms, fully aware it was something outside the planned storyline.
I was like, that's definitely flirtation.
But she was stuck. She knew the rule. She knew her father's company had a strict policy that she was not allowed to date any of the talent, and Triple H was not exactly available either. At the time, he was with another wrestler, Chyna, one of the biggest names in the company, and they were even living together.
He's dating Chyna, who's a big star at that point.
Right, which supposedly they weren't dating at that point.
Stephanie herself was also dating someone else, which made the situation complicated from every angle. Two people already involved with other partners were working inside the same company, where one of them was the boss's daughter, all under a strict rule that made this kind of relationship officially forbidden. And yet, it still began. They started seeing each other in secret, and it didn't take long for Stephanie to notice that something didn't feel right.
We saw each other for a couple months, and then when it came apparent to me that, well, obviously she's still living in your house.
He had told her that things were over between him and Chyna, but Chyna was still living in his house. When Stephanie realized this, she pulled back, but distance does not always hold for long. They eventually found their way back to each other, and this time Vince McMahon could clearly see what was happening. The boss was watching closely, and Vince McMahon is many things, but a fool is not one of them. He noticed the connection forming between his daughter and Triple H long before either of them admitted it. In fact, if Stephanie is to be believed, Vince may have even planted the idea himself.
I feel like he kind of threw us together a little bit, honestly.
She said Vince often made comments about the kind of man she should be with, and the description always sounded strangely familiar, almost exactly like someone she already knew.
To always make comments to me about, God, you need a guy that's, just like Triple H.
Her brother Shane would immediately step in to shut that down.
Then Shane would quickly jump in and say,
No.
He would say, well, not Triple H.
And Vince would circle back with the kind of wording that only Vince McMahon could say with a completely straight face.
And then my dad would go, yeah, no, a guy just like him, but I mean just like him.
A guy just like him. Not him, of course, just someone who somehow happened to be exactly like him in every possible way. So when Stephanie and Triple H finally went to Vince and told him what was going on, his reaction was not much of a surprise. Stephanie said her father seemed fine with it at first, but then something changed.
So I think that he was okay with it from, the beginning, but what happened was we started dating, and then he took away that blessing.
Vince McMahon gave his blessing at first, but later he took it back.
We were not allowed to see each other anymore.
Like Romeo and Juliet, you are forbidden to
Yeah.
see this man.
The answer was clear, no confusion and no room for negotiation. Think about that for a moment. Stephanie McMahon was a grown woman in her 20s. She had a job in the company, real responsibilities, and she was even helping write the show, yet her father told her she could not see the man she was falling for, and she listened. This was Vince's test. He gave them the green light, watched them together, and then suddenly pulled it away. If Stephanie and Triple H were only caught up in the excitement of a forbidden workplace romance, the distance would end it. But if it was something deeper, something real, they would find their way back. Stephanie later talked about this, saying Vince wanted to make sure this was not just a temporary thing. If they were going to be together, it had to be serious, it had to be permanent, because getting it wrong would not only affect the family but the business as well. A McMahon daughter marrying a top wrestler could change the company's entire power structure for years. Vince needed to know it would last, and it did. Stephanie and Triple H came back together, stayed together, and got married in 2003 in a private ceremony away from the cameras and WWE chaos. No storyline wedding, no scripted vows, but marrying the boss's daughter came with baggage that even love could not erase. The moment Triple H became Vince McMahon's son-in-law, everything he had ever achieved in the ring suddenly came under question. Every championship, every main event, and every decision that went in his favor became a topic of debate. The whispers started almost immediately and never really stopped. Was Triple H truly one of the greatest performers in wrestling history, or was he just a smart politician who married his way to the top? That question has followed him for more than 20 years, and the people trying to answer it have never been shy about sharing their opinions. To understand why these accusations stuck so strongly, you first need to understand the world Triple H came from before he ever met Stephanie McMahon, the clique and the world of backstage politics. Before Triple H became Stephanie McMahon's husband, before he became a McMahon family member, and before he held any corporate power, he was part of one of the most infamous groups in wrestling history called the Clique. This group was made up of 5 wrestlers who had major influence in the WWF locker room during the mid-1990s. Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall. And Sean Waltman. They were known for working together behind the scenes to protect their positions, influence creative decisions, and push outcomes that benefited their group, often at the expense of others. They were talented, charismatic, and operated like a small government inside the company, making sure power stayed in their hands. The most infamous moment in the Clique's history came on May 19, 1996, at Madison Square Garden. It was a non-televised house show, but what happened that night shook the entire wrestling industry. Kevin Nash and Scott Hall were leaving WWF for WCW, and in the main event, all 5 members of the Clique broke character in front of the live crowd. They hugged, raised each other's hands, and openly showed that the rivalries fans had been watching were just part of the show, while in real life they were close friends. This moment became known as the curtain call, and it broke one of wrestling's biggest unwritten rules, kayfabe, the rule that wrestlers should never publicly reveal that the competition is scripted. Nash and Hall were already leaving, so WWF could not punish them, and Shawn Michaels was the reigning champion, which made him untouchable. That left Triple H as the only one who could be punished, and Vince McMahon made sure he paid the price. Triple H was originally set to win the 1996 King of the Ring tournament, a major step in his career, but that opportunity was taken away and given to Steve Austin instead. Austin won the tournament, delivered his iconic Austin 3:16 speech, and started his rise to becoming the biggest star in the company. Meanwhile, Triple H spent months in the lower card, slowly working his way back, and eventually he did. But the curtain call left a mark on him. It created a reputation that followed him for the rest of his career, a man willing to bend the rules, protect his friends, and play the political game at the highest level. For every person who respected his ambition, there was someone in the locker room or behind a podcast microphone who resented him for it. The loudest and most consistent of those voices belonged to a man with his own complicated history with the McMahon family. A man who believed Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and Vince McMahon had worked together to destroy his career. That man was Bret Hart. Over the years, Bret Hart has called Triple H a phony and a slimeball on multiple occasions. Bret Hart claimed that Triple H was Vince McMahon's enforcer, the man who handled the dirty work so Vince did not have to. His resentment goes back to the 1997 Montreal Screwjob, when Vince famously betrayed Hart during a championship match. Bret has repeatedly linked both Triple H and Shawn Michaels to that conspiracy, believing they were part of the plan to humiliate him. He also questioned Triple H's in-ring talent, arguing that his reputation was built more on backstage politics than actual performance. At one point, Bret even said that if Triple H had been in the room when he punched Vince after the Screwjob, things might have turned out very differently, and Triple H's marriage to Stephanie may never have happened. That shows the depth of Bret's hatred. He did not just dislike Triple H, he resented everything Triple H later became. And Bret was not the only critic. Former wrestler Maven, who appeared in a SmackDown segment with Stephanie and Vince discussing Triple H, later shared similar accusations. Maven claimed Triple H worked against him behind the scenes, quietly damaging his push during production meetings. According to Maven, Triple H acted friendly face-to-face while secretly limiting his opportunities. When the cameras were off, a pattern started to emerge in the stories told about Triple H. A man who could be friendly, supportive, and easy to work with in person, but who, according to critics, would also maneuver behind closed doors to make sure things always worked in his favor. Whether that image is accurate or exaggerated depends on who is telling the story, but the number of people who describe some version of it makes it hard to ignore completely. The real question was never whether Triple H had talent, because he clearly did. The question was whether that talent alone earned him everything he achieved, or whether his relationships, especially the one with the woman who would become his wife, helped tip the balance in ways talent alone could not. When Triple H married Stephanie McMahon in 2003, the wrestling world shifted in a way that went beyond a simple love story. He was no longer just a performer, he was family. And in a company where one family controlled every major decision, being family meant something far more powerful than any championship. It meant access. The accusations of nepotism began even before the wedding took place, with critics inside and outside the company arguing that Triple H's relationship with Stephanie gave him influence he would not have earned otherwise. They point to championship reigns, main event spots, and creative decisions that seemed to favor him over other wrestlers who were just as popular, sometimes even more. They argue that he inserted himself into key storylines and positions that could have helped elevate other talent instead. They also claim he used his closeness to Vince McMahon to influence the direction of the company in ways that benefited his own legacy. Triple H has pushed back on these claims, saying in different interviews that his relationship with Stephanie never gave him special treatment when it came to titles or booking decisions. But denial is a tough argument when the timing looks so convenient to critics. He went from being punished after the curtain call to becoming one of the most decorated champions in WWE history, and that rise happened during the same period he became closer to the McMahon family. Still, it is important to separate timing from proof. Triple H was one of the hardest working performers in WWE during the late 1990s and early 2000s. His matches were consistently strong, his character work was top level, and he was known for pushing through injuries and carrying long storylines. Many wrestlers and insiders have said he earned his success through performance, not politics, and that his relationship with Stephanie was coincidence, not advantage. But even so, the perception never went away, and in wrestling, perception often carries more weight than reality. When fans watched Triple H holding championship after championship in the early 2000s, many did not see a deserving champion. They saw the boss's son-in-law getting special treatment, and that perception shaped how they viewed everything he did. The shift from performer to executive made things even more complicated. As Triple H moved away from full-time wrestling and into a corporate role, his influence over the product became direct and undeniable. He was no longer just trying to earn a spot on the card. He was helping decide who got on the card in the first place. His first major proving ground in this new role was NXT. NXT began as WWE's developmental brand, designed to shape the next generation of talent. But under Triple H's leadership, it became something far bigger than expected. It grew into one of the most critically praised brands in the company. The storytelling became sharper, matches were given more time and structure, and wrestlers were allowed to develop more naturally instead of being forced into rigid formulas. For several years, hardcore wrestling fans considered NXT better than the main WWE shows that had been running for decades. Triple H gained a lot of respect for that period, and even people who once called him a political operator or a product of nepotism had to admit he knew how to run a wrestling brand. But NXT was still a smaller system, and the real test was always whether he could bring that same success to the main stage. When Vince McMahon stepped away from the company after personal scandals, Triple H finally got that chance. He became head of creative for the entire WWE, meaning every storyline, match, and major direction now ran through him. The results have been mixed. There have been moments that felt like the NXT golden era again, with strong debuts, surprise returns, and matches that felt meaningful. But there have also been stretches that frustrated fans and drew heavy criticism from people inside the industry. Wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer has reported internal criticism within WWE over frequently changing WrestleMania plans under Triple H's leadership, something some compared to Vince McMahon's later booking habits. Critics have also pointed to decisions that seem to waste rising talent, push performers who are not connecting with fans, and create a lack of clear direction. Veteran manager Jim Cornette has also spoken about Triple H in a mixed way over the years, sometimes praising his understanding of wrestling while also criticizing his booking choices. Cornette initially used harsh words toward Triple H over the curtain call incident and other backstage decisions, but over time he has sometimes softened his stance, especially when acknowledging certain creative choices. His criticism reflects a wider split in the wrestling community, where opinions on Triple H swing between respect and frustration depending on the outcome of the product at the time. People are quick to praise him when things go well and just as quick to blame him when they do not, and the truth often ends up somewhere in the middle. Behind all of that debate is the man himself. In 2021, Triple H suffered a cardiac event that left him fighting for his life, a moment that put everything into perspective. The man who had spent decades taking punishment in the ring and pushing his body beyond normal limits suddenly faced a battle he could not outwork or outthink. Stephanie McMahon later spoke about it on her podcast, saying she had always carried a quiet fear that she might lose him early, a feeling she could never fully explain but that stayed with her through their marriage, their children, and all the highs and lows of their lives together, like a shadow she could never quite shake. And when it happened, when his heart gave out and doctors were fighting to save him, that fear became real. Stephanie described him not as a wrestler, not as an executive, and not as Vince McMahon's son-in-law, but as her husband and the father of her children, the man she chose years ago even when it meant going against her father's wishes and risking family conflict. He survived. The surgery worked, and he recovered, but the experience changed how Stephanie saw everything. She said it reshaped her priorities, making championships, power struggles, and corporate politics feel small compared to the simple reality of having him alive and sitting at the dinner table. That near loss revealed something important about how she views Triple H, not as a character on screen, but as the person she lives with away from cameras, commentary, and online debates. But outside that personal view, the questions remain. What about the fans who saw him hold titles while more popular wrestlers were overlooked? What about Bret Hart, who still carries the wounds of Montreal and believes Triple H was part of the system against him? What about Maven, who claims friendliness was just a mask? And what about the journalists who have spent years trying to separate reputation from reality? And analysts who track his booking decisions have pointed to patterns that look similar to the same political behavior he was once accused of as a performer. The answer depends on what evidence you focus on. If you ask veterans who worked with him during the Attitude Era, many will describe Triple H as a calculating figure who always managed to come out on top. If you ask talent who came through NXT under his leadership, many will describe him as a supportive mentor who gave them opportunities they would not have received under Vince McMahon. Both versions can exist at the same time. People are not one-dimensional. The ambitious backstage operator and the loyal family man can exist in the same person without contradiction.